Hey there guys, we're taking a look at Need for Speed Heat running on the AMD Ryzen 5 5500U. Now the game is currently running at 1080p with the lowest in-game graphics preset. Now at the stock 15 watt TDP we are getting a pretty rough experience here, though it's not as bad as you would think because of the fact that the 1% lows are very close to the admittedly very brutal 25 FPS average. It is at least a consistent bad experience instead of an inconsistent one, which would make the whole thing completely unusable. This is just more an exercise in patience more than anything else. Realistically speaking, you should not be playing the game like this. Of course, since we are already running at the lowest in-game graphics settings, we can try to improve this a little bit by just dropping the resolution down from 1080p to 720p. And hopefully that can net us some actual nice performance gains that would put this into legitimately playable territory. So 720p pretty much does give us a nice boost in the 1% lows and in the averages, though the 1% lows are still dipping below 30, not by a significant margin, and the averages of 40 are very much welcome compared to where we were at before. Though admittedly, considering it's a pretty big drop in resolution, it's not as big of a gain as you would hope to see. I was really hoping to see closer to 60 FPS average here, and we're a good bit of distance away from that, where we're even struggling to stay above 40. But of course, this is at the stock TDP, so we might actually be able to improve this enough to make this playable if we adjust the TDP settings with the AMD APU tuning utility. Now at the 25 watt TDP at 1080p, the level of performance that we're getting here is a little bit more playable. We are now at a 30 FPS average, though the 1% lows are still dropping down pretty low. It feels more reasonable to play like this, but it's still not going to be an enjoyable experience. You would pretty much just be doing this almost out of sheer desperation or ignorance, where you didn't know that you could just adjust the resolution and get more performance. Overall, I would say 1080p is still out of the question at 25 watts unless you're really desperate to play like this. Now dropping things down to 720p did not actually see as big of a gain as I was hoping here. We are now keeping the averages well above 40, though the 1% lows still are below 30, and it's really not that much of an improvement from where we were at before. So really unfortunate to see that, because it really means that at 720p we're not seeing as big of a gains as I was hoping. And it's still at the edge of really being a very enjoyable experience, though I suspect that at this point we're reaching other bottlenecks that won't be easily resolved by just throwing more TDP at it. It's certainly a playable experience, and I wouldn't really say that this is bad overall. It's just not as big of a gain as I was hoping to see, considering that we are pushing more power through the chip and it is generating a good bit of more heat. And that excess heat pretty much leads to more noise, and it does actually make this a not very enjoyable experience in terms of actually playing it, just because the system is kind of just sitting there screeching at you. But of course, there is one more preset that will really get this system screaming at us, and that is the performance preset in the AMD APU tuning utility. It pretty much sets a target TDP of 30 watts, and that can really get the system going. As you can see here at 1080p, it really does not do much to improve the overall experience. The averages are still around the 30 FPS mark. The 1% lows are close behind that 30 FPS average. So overall, the experience is consistent enough that I can see somebody getting away with playing like this, but I just really don't see a reason to do that when you can at least drop down to 900p or 720p and get an improved experience over this. And really just look at how much heat we're generating now versus where we were at before, just to squeeze out a little bit better performance. It's overall just not great. And honestly, I think prolonged use of the system at these temperatures will actually eventually lead to problems with the system later down the line. And of course, 720p is also not really seeing as big of an uplift as I was hoping to see. We are at least having 1% lows that are above 30 FPS, and we are getting averages that are very close to 50 here. But overall, the 1% lows are still not as big of an uplift as I was hoping to see, because we're still teetering on the edge there of 30, but it is at least a bit more consistent, and really this is as good as it gets. And we are pumping a lot of wattage through this chip, where it is really starting to cook itself here. These are some very high temperatures that we're reaching just to try to get this to be barely playable. It's really overall not looking great. This really is a very demanding game, and you can tell by it. Just look at the fact that we're actually utilizing the CPU quite a bit here. I mean, considering it is a 6-core, 12-threaded CPU, the fact that we're seeing more than 60% usage with going up until the mid 70s, almost 80%. This game is really CPU demanding. That probably explains the fact that we're actually reaching some pretty high temperatures here. And if you want to see a really stark contrast to what we're seeing here, though, let's drop the TDP down to the battery saver preset, which is down to 8 watts. Now I'm showing it to you because really this is just a ridiculous setting. The game is just running like a slideshow, a consistent and smooth 10 FPS here. This is at 720p because 1080p was even worse than this. It overall is just not even remotely playable at the 8-watt TDP. No one should be playing a game like this. It's just ridiculous. But anyways, I appreciate you watching. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.